for the legal market or legal field in a while. All right, so I have to go back, I have to get a refresher so you guys can get the information. All right, so the only thing I ask you guys to do is you take this information, you pass it on. If you know someone in North Carolina, you pass it on to them, let them know what their rights are. You share the video for me. All right, so we'll get started. So let's talk about tenant rights. First of all, let's talk about what a tenant is. What a tenant actually means is someone that has a lease, all right, with a landlord, even a verbal lease, all right? So if you are someone, only someone that has a lease with the landlord, even if it's verbal, even if you are not paying rent, you have just decided to pay utilities or do some kind of maintenance on the house, as long as there is an exchange, then you are considered a tenant, all right? All right, so a lot of people have asked me on another video when we talked about HUD issuing a rule for a 30-day notice. Some people were coming on and saying that their state only gave them 15 days. Some people said they always thought it was 30 days like I thought in different states, but it is different. It is different. But overall, a lot of these rules, you know, apply. Maybe the time frame is different. So you just want to check for your state. And if you're looking for a particular state, just leave it in the chat, all right, in the comments. And then I can come back on and do a video per se for your state, all right? So a lot of people are wondering about evictions. So first of all, you have a right to remain in the premises, all right? You have a right to remain in the premises. Evictions have to be taken to court and they must have a final court order, all right? So you can remain in the premises until all of that. So what I ask you to do usually for everyone, because everyone's lease is different, is that you read thoroughly through your leases, guys. That's the only thing that will protect you. That's the only thing and the only way for you to know what is in that lease, regardless of what state you are. You may have something that is particular, the way the landlord wrote it up, anything like that. You want to read your leases thoroughly, all right? So read it thoroughly from top to the bottom. All right, so every landlord and tenant needs to give a proper notice of no longer wanting the lease. So whatever that you have agreed to, as I said before, in the lease, you need to be able to give them a proper notice if you are going to vacate the property, and they need to give you a proper notice if they want you out of the property, all right? So let me tell you this. One thing that people do not know, if the landlord happens to extend the lease, even after asking you to leave, they must give you another notice, okay? Requesting you to leave. So if, say I'm the landlord, I gave you 30 days, I told you to leave, you came to me with an extenuating circumstance, or you said, you know, I just need to stay a little longer, can I stay this month or however, and that tenant gives me the money, then I have to give another notice, because basically I've extended it. And a lot of these leases are, if you don't say anything, it just goes from month to month. So after a lease is over, usually it's just a month to month thing, all right? If it's written, if it's verbal, and a lot of times if it's non-verbal, if they keep continuing to collect the money, then we are going on from month to month until they give you a notice to leave again, all right? Hello guys, hello. So we're talking about the state of North Carolina. We're talking about tenant rights. If you want to know about another state, you can leave it in the chat and then I'll come back to you about what that state's rules are. All right. All right, so a landlord also has to prove a breach of the lease, all right? So they cannot just say that you did something that went against the lease. They have to be able to prove it, guys. All right. So if a lease did not say a particular thing in it, so say your landlord comes by and says that you cannot have this barbecue grill sitting out here, and you said, well, my lease did not state that. You did not put that in the lease, so then that is not a breach of the lease. But what the landlord can do, let's say you have that barbecue grill and you start a fire or something, you know, your kids knock something over, damages something in the yard, what they can do is go to court and get a violation. I'm sorry, not a violation. They can make you pay for damages, all right? So they have to file something for a direct violation of the lease to get possession of their property back. They have to prove that there was a breach, okay? All right. So as I said before, you may have to pay certain damages for something that you damaged versus getting kicked out, all right? Being kicked out means breach of lease. If it's before your lease is over, you cannot get kicked out if it is not a breach of the lease. As I said before, read thoroughly through your leases from top to bottom. You have to know what you are signing, all right? Read thoroughly through the lease. All right, as we talked about before, if your lease is ending and neither party says anything, the lease is subject to be continued on a month-to-month basis, all right? Be very careful though with that, because your landlord may charge fees on a month-to-month basis. So you want to make sure that you are communicating, but if no one is saying anything and the landlord is continuing to collect money, then you are technically still in a lease and you are going month to month, but they have the right to charge you an extra fee, all right? So communicate with that. And I also want to tell you another reason why you need to be informed on the law and reading those leases over is because a lot of your landlords do not know the law. And I know you think they do. They do not. They don't know either, right? So you need to be informed. All right. So landlords do not have to accept late rent. They don't have to accept the late rent, all right? And they can give you also a notice for eviction. So you want to check out your default clause in your lease, all right? Because not every lease gives you maybe a 10-day grace period for late fees or anything like that. So they do not have to accept the late rent. All right. Landlord also cannot terminate in the middle of lease terms because they feel like it. They cannot decide, I no longer want you there. I do not like you for whatever reason. I want to do something else with the property, unless there is a breach. It has to be a breach only. All right. Now, tenants. You can be responsible for your guests, the actions of your guests, the actions of your household members. So you want to be mindful about that. Just because you didn't do something and your household members did, remember they can ask you for damages and you can be responsible for your guests because they are your guests. The only thing with that is subsidized housing has different protections, okay? So when we talk about subsidized housing, when I talk about Section 8 on here, they have different protections. So check your leases. So sometimes those contracts, they will give you more protections than a private landlord and with tenant rules, all right? Although that doesn't mean that you can have any criminal activity, all right? They will not accept that. So there's no protections on subsidized housing. If there's criminal activities, then you can be evicted immediately, all right? A lot quicker. All right, there's also protections for domestic violence abuse. So you are not reliable for their actions if you are a domestic violence victim. All right, there may be protections there against evictions, but there's no protections against not paying your rent. So even if you are a domestic violence victim, then there is still no protections if you don't pay your rent. all right? I want to tell you what I noted here is to keep everything in writing. If the lease says no pets, you know, this is the thing again. So we talked about if a landlord came over and said, you're not supposed to have a barbecue grill, but you said that's not in my lease, so that's not a breach. But on the flip side, say your landlord comes over and your lease had said no pets. And you happen to have a pet anyways, and your landlord came over and your landlord actually likes your pet, you know, didn't say a word, played with your pet and everything, and continues to take your money, they cannot come back later for an eviction about that. So keep that in mind. They cannot also evict you for things like you need emotional support for your pets, disabled ramps that you had to have installed, something like that for you disabled folks. These are not violations, all right? Also, watch for unfair trade practices. Check for your state, which that just means that people are charging astronomical prices for something on a daily basis. But if you have a lease, then your lease is going to tell you what you're to pay each month. All right? If you happen to be one of those people that have to go to court, that they are filing an eviction on you, please be on time. Be on time. So when I was in my refresher class for this to give you this relevant information, they said don't even be 2 minutes late because your case can be tossed out, all right? And whoever has the most detailed information wins the case. So bring your paperwork, bring your pictures, bring whatever that you have. So your landlord can be saying one thing, and just because they're the landlord and you have paperwork or something to prove your case, whoever has the most detailed testimony is going to win that case, per se. All right? Also, you can object in court if you are in court for hearsay. All right? And you also have a right to file an appeal. So if things don't go the way that you want in court, you can file an appeal. You can ask questions. You can file as indigent. You can ask the court clerk. You can ask them to have another court date and actually get the appeal form and get the court date, everything for free. All right. The thing about North Carolina, though, they are so booked up. If you ask for a court date, another court date, it could take 2 weeks up to a year to get another court date. All right. That's just the way it's going in the state of North Carolina. But say you have gotten evicted and the landlord and the sheriff has padlocked your door and you still have belongings in the house, you have a right only within 7 days to request to set up an appointment to get the things out of the house that you need. But I will ask you to get your things and your belongings out of that house immediately, all right, before that padlocking even occurs. But if you communicate well with the landlord and everyone involved, you shouldn't have these hassles or troubles, okay? All right, so your landlord is responsible for repairs in your home. So you have a right to a habitable home, guys. You have a right to a habitable home. And I have done videos about how to get free home repairs, and you don't even have to own the home. It could also be a home that you are renting. You know, so you want to go back and look through those videos about getting free home repairs and grants of that nature. But you have a right to live in a habitable home, all right? Let's see here. I wrote down some other pointers for you guys. All right, so hey Queen. All right, so let's just say that there's something in the home that is not habitable and you decide not to pay the rent. You don't want to do that, all right? So it's gonna work in your favor to go ahead and pay the rent, be able to prove that you are able to, that you were paying the rent, even if you are having uninhabitable conditions. And I know that seems bad, but the court will rule in your favor. All right, may be able to get you reduced rent, free rent, or however. So still continue to pay that rent. All right, so the courts can be on your side. Let the judge decide and say that you do not have to pay the rent. Don't decide not to pay it on your own. All right, the landlord needs to be responsible for those repairs. Continue paying your rent and let the judge deal with them. All right. I also wrote down that you need to be able to call legal aid. Let's say if you need some of this support and you are having some hassles, and before you get to court, you can call legal aid in North Carolina. All right. So I have a telephone number that I have wrote down for legal aid. Their helpline is 1-866-219-5262. And this is in North Carolina. All right. So, and also if you're a domestic violence victim, call legal aid. All right. So it's a possibility that you can get out of your lease. I'm not saying that you can, but it is a possibility that you can get out of your lease, your remaining lease, if you're a domestic violence victim. All right. All right, so one other thing I want to say before I leave out of here, just make sure I went over everything. Read your leases, guys. Read your leases from top to bottom. All right, because it can say some things in there that you're thinking, well, I know the law, but if it's in that lease, there are some things that you may be missing. And also, when you move in a property, take pictures. When you move out the property, take pictures, guys. Keep your paperwork, keep everything in writing. All right. If you're not a subscriber here, this is what we talk about. We talk about living creatively in every area of our lives, but I also have this segment where we talk about affordable housing while living here in America, and we will be talking about tenant rights more so. So subscribe, pass this video on to the people that you know are in North Carolina, like the video, maybe that'll help share it more. I love you guys, and I'll see you in a future video. All right, be well, be safe out there.